Mishnah 5. A scroll in which the writing was erased, but there still remained thereof 85 letters, as many as in the paragraph Vayihi bin Sarah Ha'aron, Vayomer Moshe. So they didn't have a lot of parchment, so to be able to write a new Torah scroll, you would take a non-kosher Torah scroll, and you would go through and you would scrape out lovingly all of the broken letters and so forth, or it could have been a parchment used for anything that was still a kosher parchment. You would scrape out all the letters, and you would rewrite on top of it. That's called erasing, and then writing. What if many of the letters were gone and only a few letters were left in the scroll? Is it still a sacred scroll? And the answer is, if it's got a passage as long as Vayihi bin Soah Ha'aron Vayomer Moshe, then it still renders the hands unclean. And that's the theology. If you touch a Torah scroll, your hands become impure. The Torah scroll does that to you. So one of the most common misunderstandings of purity laws comes up in the modern conversation about women. Can a woman read from the Torah? We know very clearly in the Shulchan Aruch that it says, Isha Ola v'Korei b'Torah. A woman goes up and reads from the Torah in a mixed congregation with men. The Shulchan Aruch is absolutely clear that that is permissible in the halakha. But the people who want to say, oh, a woman can't go up there, one of the things they try and say is that because a woman has a natural cycle of purity and impurity associated with her body and going to mikvah, that you wouldn't know if a woman was impure. God forbid she should go up and touch the Torah. Those people are absolutely backwards in their thought. You cannot make a Torah impure. A Torah is the pure object that renders you impure because of its holiness when you come in contact with it. Now that's a little funny for us, but impurity is not contagious. You don't catch it in that sense. You can become impure by touching things that are impure, but mostly you become impure by touching things that are holy. Reproductive matters, dead bodies. These are holy things, and you become impure by touching holy things. So if the scroll is still holy, it renders the hands unclean. A sheet of a scroll whereon are written 85 letters, as many as in the portion by Vayihi bin Soah Ha'aron, also renders the hands unclean. So even if it's not parchment, if you've got a piece of paper like this and you write in Hebrew 85 letters with the Word of God or 85 letters out of the Torah, you have a Genizah document. You have a document that is holy. All the sacred scriptures renders the hand unclean, and then they have a debate. The Song of Songs and Kohelet render the hands unclean. Rabbi Yehuda said the Song of Songs renders the hand unclean, but there's a disagreement about Kohelet. So we're going to read from Kohelet. Rabbi Yossi says that Kohelet does not render the hands unclean, but there is a disagreement regarding Song of Songs. Rabbi Shimon says Kohelet comes under the lenient rulings of the school of Shammai, but under the God forbid no one in Israel ever contended regarding Song of Songs to say that it does not render the hands unclean. The whole world are not worth the day whereon the Song of Songs was given to Israel, for all of the writings are sacred, but the Song of Songs is most sacred. And if they did have any difference of opinion, they differed only about Kohelet. Rabbi Yochanan ben Yoshua, the son of Rabbi Akiva's father-in-law, said, in accordance with the opinion of Genizah, did they contend, and so did they decide. So, just to make sure that we're certain about Kohelet, we're going to read from Kohelet. A season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for being born and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for uprooted the planting, a time for slaying and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing and a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones and a time for gathering stones, a time for embracing and a time for shunning embraces, a time for seeking and a time for losing, a time for speaking and a time for starting, a time for ripping, a time for sowing, a time for silence and a time for speaking, a time for loving, a time for hating, a time for war and a time for peace. What value then can a man of affairs get from what he earns? I realize that the only worthwhile thing there is for them is to enjoy themselves and to do what is good in their lifetime. Also that whenever a man does eat and drink and get enjoyment out of all his wealth, it is a gift of God. You'll see on this page it says Genizah on the left.
we're going to be reading that passage. A book is the most delightful companion. There is in the world no friend more faithful, no teacher more proficient, no message more enduring. It will join you in solitude, accompany you in exile, serve as a candle in the dark, and entertain you in your loneliness. It will do you good, yet ask no favor in return. It gives, and it does not take. These words, written at the beginning of the 12th century by Moses Genizah, Spanish Hebrew poet and philosopher, explain how a person can never be alone when surrounded by books. The Jewish people values learning as the highest priority, and learning is symbolized by the study of books. We bestow respect on this primary source of knowledge during the book's usable days, and we show respect when it deteriorates beyond use. Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, one of our greatest rabbinic authorities, states, a scroll of Torah which has become old or unfit for use is to be laid in an earthen vessel and buried inside a scholar. In our congregation cemetery, there is a sacred place where worn-out holy books are buried. Because these books contain God's name, they are called Shemot, or names. Now we have it's kind of like a poem. Can I have a volunteer? Does someone want to read? Lori, do you want to read?
Sacred words of Torah?
Yep, loud and clear.
What is Torah? Torah is like pure water, which washes us clean and refreshes us. Torah is like honey, which sweetens our lives and preserves us from the bitterness of hatred. Torah is like a shield, which protects us from the violence of wicked people, from danger around us. Torah is like a crown, which sets us above all other creatures, making us like monarchs. Torah is like a path given by God, which shows us the way out of trouble and brings us to peace. Therefore, let us not depart from the study of our Torah. For in Torah we can find everything we need to make our lives good. Our teachers say, whoever honors the Torah will, in turn, be honored by all. From generation to generation, may the words of Torah always be on our lips. Whenever the ark was set down, Moses would say, Adonai, may you dwell among the myriad families of the people of Israel return. Adonai, to your sanctuary, you and your glorious ark, let your Kohanim be clothed in triumph. Let your faithfulness sing for you. For the sake of David, your servant, do not reject your anointing.
Thank you, Lori. Oh, it goes on.
The Torah of Adonai is complete, reviving the spirit. The words of Adonai are good, guiding the simple. The precepts of Adonai are just, gladdening the heart. The mitzvah of Adonai is clear, opening the eyes. The awesome strength of Adonai is pure, enduring forever. The laws of Adonai are true, altogether just. More precious are they than gold, than purest gold. Sweeter are they than honey, dripping over honeycomb. Psalm 19:8.
You're the rabbi, Eric.
Perfect. Precious teaching do I give you, never forsake my Torah. It is a tree of life for those who grasp it, and all who uphold it are blessed. Its ways are pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Help us turn to you, and we shall return. Renew our lives as in days of old. These are the deeds that yield immediate fruit, and continue to yield fruit in the Olam Haba, the world to come. Honoring father and mother, doing deeds of loving kindness, attending the house and study mourning, providing hospitality, visiting the sick, helping the needy bride, attending the dead, probing the needy in prayer, making peace between one person and another, between husband and wife, and the study of Torah is the most basic of all.
We now lay these books to sacred rest. We bury them because they have the same sanctity as a human body or a scroll. Physical things which contain in them the importance and the message of God on earth. There's no other particular ceremony, just as at a cemetery. It is our sacred duty. I encourage each person to at least place a handful or a spadeful of the earth, and we'll continue until the ground, hopefully, is level, and that they are well protected and buried.
Dropping it through your pants. Yeah. of afraid that people, relatives might think it's disrespectful. Would you throw your garbage in there?
Anybody who wants to take a shovelful is welcome. You grab the other shovel.
Read it 3 times.